Joining us to kind of dive into this and also touch on some of the Department of Justice's poll monitors is Ken Cuccinelli, former Virginia Attorney General and acting Deputy Secretary of DHS. He's national chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative. Very important organization. Ken, good to see you. What is going on in Arizona? Because it's if only they could have anticipated that the election was going to be today.
Yeah, well, if only someone had told them before today. Yeah, so I watched their own video of their explanation of the problem, and they said about 20% of their tabulators aren't working. And they urge people to either go to another polling place, which apparently you can do in Arizona. In Virginia, you got to vote at your own, where I am. And or you can stick it in a box, a locked box. They say secure, and it'll be taken to a central tabulator, which is how they tabulate the mail-in votes. So from their perspective, they think they have a reasonable solution. The problem is this should have never happened in the first place. And there are reasons people vote in person on election day is they want to see it go in the tabulator and they want to see it counted.
Right.
And now they're denied that option. And then these same people will complain when there is a lower confidence level expressed in the election, when it's their fault.
Yeah.
And you note, of course, Dana, that Katie Hobbs is the Secretary of State and is nowhere to be seen on this today. Not surprisingly, perhaps, because it would be too embarrassing for her.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. She's the Secretary of State, not a single word. And I've been scouring, not a single word from her about this so far.
One other thing on that, Dana, she was asked, not just by Carrie Lake, but by Democrats to recuse herself from overseeing this election, and she declined. She declined to do that. So she had a chance to step out of owning this problem, and she said, oh no, I'm in charge. She owns this, and she doubled down on owning this problem. And it's just one more reason people ought to not give her a promotion.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Talking with Ken Cuccinelli, the chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative. One of the things that Harmeet Dillon was saying, she's an attorney. I know you're familiar with her. She's been on Fox. She was saying that she was advising people to stay in line and have their ballots, which kind of seems to go because you and I think sort of view this as the same. I like to see my vote count. I like to see, the machine boop, 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 and then, tabulate it. She was saying, put it in the box because they were anticipating this because of, I guess there were a lot of previous problems, particularly with Maricopa County, but throughout Arizona, but especially in that county. And so they have a lot of Republicans that are watching the boxes and will be accompanying them to the headquarters, they said, where they're counted?
Yes, and that is part of the security and oversight. I mean, we're named the Election Transparency Initiative for a reason. That transparency is critical. And what that means is citizens have eyes on that box all the way till those ballots go in a tabulator.
That's
and
an important
so again,
job.
There are backup mechanisms, but they are doing nothing to inspire confidence in their operations here after all the questions that came out of Maricopa County 2 years ago.
Yeah. But what's wrong with demanding that, it's the United States, it's 2022. We can have our elections in a day. We should be able to count everything in a day and know definitively, except in the areas, I get it, where you don't get 50%, you have to have the runoff. But aside from that, we should know, within the day. Is that unrealistic? Because it doesn't seem like it should be.
So in Florida in 2020, a lousy year for our elections, they were done counting on election night. And that is the third largest state. It is the largest swing state. And they were done on election night with no complaints from either side, no major complaints from either side. So this can be done. Now, mind you, Florida had Bush v. Gore 20 years ago. And they were humiliated. And it wasn't allegations of fraud. It was utter incompetence on a statewide basis. And they spent years fixing up that system. And what a lot of Americans have realized in the last 2 years is we've been ignoring our election systems. We have a lot of work to do. Now, I will say this. As we sit here today, Dana, we are far better off than we were 2 years ago, including in Arizona, by the way, because there are more security provisions in place. There's more transparency in place. And those things do give you greater confidence in the outcome. We still, though, have a lot of work to do And you and I have just been talking about Maricopa County.
Yeah, there's a lot of
So,
work to be done. We're talking with
this is a problem that, as you said, it's not like they didn't know election day was coming. They should have been testing every one of these machines, not spot testing them, which I suspect was going on, because I doubt this was working at 5 a.m. and stopped working at 6 a.m.
Oh, that's a really important point. Ken Cuccinelli is with the Election Transparency Initiative. He's the national chairman. Talking about some of these voting places, and I was looking at it seems petty, but to even do this now, but at the same time, I feel like after everything in 2016 and some of the stuff in 2020, you know where I'm going. It's necessary. I immediately look at the party affiliation. Who is the county recorder? Who are the board of elections? Who is the secretary of state? Who is the director of elections? And I realize states have and counties have different setups to administer their elections. But I immediately want to look at what's the party makeup. Not saying that every Democrat is like this, and there are certainly some Republicans that are, I would say, compromised. I was reading about Stephen Riker. There's some criticisms coming out about the county recorder there, but by and large, it doesn't make me think that they're necessarily incompetent. It just makes me distrust their ethics, and I want to know that it's being handled in a proper manner. Am I just being way too... I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do get a little uneasy. Speak to that a little bit, because I don't want to undermine faith in our electoral system, but at the same time, I just feel like it should be pretty bipartisan.
It should, and where I'm going later today is up to Prince William County, Virginia, where two swing races are going to have not be decided alone, but it's the major county in two races. And we have a registrar there, that's the title in Virginia for the local person who runs the election, who has shown a propensity to just not take the law as a suggestion instead of a requirement. And the Republicans took him to court. He got spanked earlier this week or last week. And yet he's violating other laws as well. And we haven't seen anybody doing anything fraudulently, but the laws are there at the outset. So everybody's playing by the same set of rules. And part of those rules are just what you said, Dana. Both sides get to watch. They get to see everything. And if you're hiding things, the natural question is why? Why? That isn't a partisan question. That's a human question. And the whole reason, if you don't want people to question your performance, let them watch what you're doing, even your mistakes and how you solve them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't get a lot of that openness in many places. And it's the cover up, right? That's always worse than the crime.
Right.
That's what really pulls the plug out of the tub on election confidence.
You had noted earlier, you had retweeted Election Transparency Initiative on Twitter, because Fetterman's campaign, they've already hired lawyers, which that immediately, I saw this last night and I thought he's going to drag this out. Either, it's an optic to try to, easier explain a loss or something. But they said that they had a memo to reporters, buckle up for a long week. Before a vote's even counted, they're already telling people this. It's almost like they really do want to sow, this suspicion in the minds of voters to not trust this system if it doesn't benefit them.
When they think they're going to lose.
Yeah.
For 20 years, election denialism was fanned and supported by the mainstream media, and then it was suddenly insurrection. Now it is back in. It's a media fad. It's okay to deny elections. Stacey Abrams was already doing it. Joe Biden's been doing it since January. John Fetterman's doing it. But understand this, in Pennsylvania, Dana, this is a tactical move on their part. They're conditioning the people of Pennsylvania because they're going to sue, expecting that very left-wing political Supreme Court to hand them whatever they need to win. They're counting on that state Supreme Court. No, they will not sue in federal court. They will sue in state court because they have a very left-wing Supreme Court that has two of the justices ran on the idea that they would make these decisions on a left-wing basis. So that's a Supreme Court that can cause very serious problems in election confidence, in the outcome. And the Fetterman team, with Mark Elias on board of Russiagate fame or infamy, is leading that legal effort. So that's what's going on. It isn't just that they're calling the election into question because Oz looks like he's leading now. It's because they have a plan, and that plan is to deliver up a questionable enough election to their state Supreme Court that they already know what that state Supreme Court will do.
That could be thwarted if there is strong enough turnout, could it not?
Of course. You can always outvote the margin of litigation.
Love that.
And
that's how it should be. I mean, and that's why I'm hoping that turnout, because I know typically in midterms, turnout tends to lag a little bit, especially when compared with general elections. Are you seeing that this time around? Because in certain areas, and I know every area is different, you can't use one as like the universal representation for all. But some of these areas I'm a little surprised, like Georgia's early voting, and, even where I'm at in Texas, it's been a little surprising because we've been on the struggle bus a little bit with some midterm turnout.
Well, and, Georgia is an interesting choice because of the left-wing explosion over what voting suppressors they've been, right? Mm-hmm. Well, all the election cleanup they did has led to the highest turnout in their primary and so far in their general, in the early voting. Virginia last year blew the doors off of turnout. Now, we have a 4-year cycle. We have elections in odd years in Virginia, so we get different benchmarks. Normally in that election cycle, the turnout is below 50%. It was like 65%. It exploded last year. And so I fully expect that what you've seen in Georgia will be replicated in other parts of the country. I think this is going to be a very high turnout election. That's very good for America, of course. Those of us in the election reform business want it easy to vote and hard to cheat. But we want both. And the American people want both. They want confidence in the outcome that only comes from security measures that are actually implemented and enforced.
There we go. And that's what we need. And we need to have those for sure. Well, last quick question for you, talking with Ken Cuccinelli. Definitive answer tonight, you think?
In some states, yes. And more in congressional races than Senate races. More local the race, the more likely you'll get an earlier outcome.
Boy, it feels like Oz is going to have to hire lawyers for his lawyers, I think.
He's already got lawyers.
Yeah, he's going to need a lot. That's what it sounds like. What a mess. Ken Cuccinelli, we appreciate what you do. Thank you so much for watching out on this for all of us and for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Of course. Take care.